Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, whether Brexit will make us richer or poorer, as we just heard Rachel saying, it might make us poorer in the long run remains to be seen. But did some people make a lot of money out of the referendum itself? Earlier, I spoke to Bloomberg journalist Kit Chilell. How could you have made a killing on referendum night?
There are a number of different ways that you might trade a Brexit referendum. The first and simplest way, and we know that hedge funds did this, is to trade the poll. If you're able to replicate what a pollster is going to release to the public at, say, 10 p.m, you will be able to predict how that poll moves financial markets. And you can make a surefire trade on what that direction is going to be, and you can make an easy profit. The second way you can trade is to get better information than is being released to the public. Make your own analysis of that data and accurately predict that the referendum is going to be leave rather than remain sooner than anyone else.
Right. And on this occasion, on the night of the referendum, what happened in terms of people betting on a Remain result as opposed to a Leave result?
Well, one thing we saw on the night of the Brexit referendum was there was lots of false sentiment in the market. The pound actually reached its highest level in 6 months, shortly before results started coming in. And one of the reasons for that was that polling data in the run-up to the referendum was mostly showing that it was likely to be a result for Remain. And that's one of the reasons we first became interested in this story. Now, one of the most interesting aspects of all this is that it's illegal to share exit poll data with any section of the public before 10 p.m. That's a clear definition under the law. So one of the areas we wanted to explore was who was given this information and when, how did they use it?
And what's your evidence for how information which might have been released before that exit poll was used?
Well, certainly the purpose of having a private exit poll is that it gives you hours in advance notice of what's going to happen at 10 p.m. and after midnight. So results would have started coming in through the private exit polls to the hedge fund clients as early as 1 p.m, 2 p.m, 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Now, if you're a currency trader, you don't need a 6-hour head start to beat the market. You need half an hour or less. So it was a lot of time for them to be able to adjust their strategy.
Right. I mean, there was, of course, on the night, Nigel Farage. In fact, I was down in Manchester for the evening, and Nigel Farage was already conceding early that Remain had won. How did that fit into your story?
One of the reasons we focused on Nigel Farage in the story is that his comments had an impact on the currency markets that night, along with a poll released by YouGov. Those two events filled a news vacuum between 10 p.m, when the polls closed, and midnight, just after midnight, when results started coming in. So those two events pushed the pound higher directly before it crashed. And the fact that the pound rose before it fell made it possible for a small number of hedge funds to make a larger profit than they would have done otherwise.
But where is your evidence that backs up this idea that City traders did have some sort of prior information or were behind a certain result happening in order to make money?
Well, we spent 7 months on this story interviewing more than 30 executives at hedge funds, polling firms. These are real strategies that were being used by real hedge funds to make real money, and we identify some of those in our story. Some of the biggest hedge funds in the country made hundreds of millions of dollars that day betting on the Brexit referendum. So we know from our reporting that these things happened. What we wanted to understand was how close is the relationship between the polling firms that we all know and the hedge fund clients that we don't know so much about.
Right, but is there a smoking gun? I mean, your story only really works and stacks up, if you like, if City traders knew before anyone else that Leave was going to win, and we don't know that.
Well, that's not necessarily true. Take the example of if you know ahead of time just how a poll is going to look. If you're able to replicate the result of a public poll in private, you can make a good prediction about how the markets will move just on the poll. You don't need to know whether the result of the referendum is Leave or Remain.
But were they able to do that?
Yes, we think so. According to our sources, yes.
Right, but even if all of this is true, that some traders did benefit from better intelligence over the pending result and beat the expectations, netting millions, the fact is no one has done anything illegal. Isn't that true?
Well, one legal expert we spoke to described this area of law as a grey area. The law is quite clear that you're not allowed to release exit poll data to any section of the public. What isn't clear is what the definition of a section of the public is, because it's never been tested. As far as we know, there have been no prosecutions. I believe this law was drafted with the intention to stop polls being used to meddle in a political process. It wasn't drafted with financial markets in mind. So it's just an unexplored area of law. And I'm not a lawyer, I can't answer those questions, but those are for other people to speculate about.
Thank you. Kit Chalel there. Well, we asked the former UKIP leader Nigel Farage if he wanted to come on the programme and talk about this Bloomberg story. His spokesman told us he would be making no further comment. He referred us to Mr Farage's LBC radio programme yesterday, during which the UKIP MEP said, "Chaps at Bloomberg, it's a wonderful little conspiracy theory. It's all a bit of fun, but it's a complete load of old tosh." Let's just get your response, Rachel, to the story, because Kit basically said there should be transparency. We should know if people have been able to make money. Whatever the outcome of that is, it wouldn't have changed the outcome of the referendum.
No. So I do think there's something amoral about this. You're sort of playing with people's votes to make money for personal gain. But actually, crucially, I don't think it would have made any difference to the outcome of the referendum. More important potentially is whether there was any other kind of interference. You know, the number of tweets from Russian bots, as in the American election. So if there's some kind of interference of that kind that would have actually influenced the outcome, that for me is much more serious.
How worried are you about interference, alleged interference in elections that could have swayed the outcome, Seymour?
Well, you're talking about Russia interfering and electing my man, you know, the orange man.
Is he your man?
My man? Well, no, not at all. That's, here's, I'm a contrarian, and so I'm a skeptic. But I remember that the American intelligence community, about which I've written a lot in years past, said with great confidence again and again after we invaded Iraq that we had high confidence that there were weapons of mass destruction. The WMD, remember again and again, high confidence.
I'll never forget it.
How can you? And so when you listen to what they say about the Russian, the allegations that the Russians broke into the computers or the internet of the Democratic National Committee and influenced the election with trolls and all these other stories, the American intelligence, the best they've done is once again, they're saying high confidence. And I will tell you, I'm not an expert, but I know people in the signals community. I know how good your country is. I know how good our country is. And I will tell you, if we knew, we'd say it.
Right. I mean, do you think that there just isn't enough evidence there and that it's convenient to blame the Russians?
I think we can't say for sure that they swayed it one way or the other, but it is different to the WMD situation because you can actually see the trolls and people have traced them back to Moscow accounts. And I think what is definitely clear is that Putin and the Kremlin want to interfere, that it's about information. The information war, the new Cold War, if you like, is an information war rather than a nuclear standoff. And that's quite dangerous because that's about undermining trust in our democracy.
And that's true, isn't it? I mean, that is where now the battle is being fought.
I'm amazed at the notion that the Russians could effectively interfere in American policy, and effectively to the point of changing the election.
But what about the evidence of the trolls? You know, there have been cases of them being traced back to
There's 13
Moscow.
trolls, I will tell you right now. There was a Russian company named. I'm just going to give you facts. The Russian company named has gone in and actually appeared. As you know, the problem with the troll case in the special prosecutor, Mr. Mueller, brought a case, and he named 13 Americans he said were trolls. And we can't, they're all overseas in Russia, and we can't bring them here. But the company it was named, has gone into court and said, are you kidding? It's gone into court and filed appeal after appeal and making a big case of it, hiring a very good lawyer, and basically saying, put up or shut up. What you've done here is in one of their briefs, and I do read these briefs, they argue that the Democrats lost an election. They're looking for the usual suspect. Okay. I'm quoting the famous movie, you know, round up the usual suspects. Casablanca, remember in the end? Major, whatever his name is, Major so-and-so has been shot. Round up the usual suspect. That was the end of the movie. And they actually, in a brief, cited that as a footnote.
But in this case, they're not just the usual suspects. The Russians definitely have a desire and an intention.
And a motivation.
And to influence and interfere. Whether or not they've succeeded is a different question.
But whether or not they could is another question.
All right, we're going to leave it there.